So we're still kind of in this massive tug of war, aren't we? Remote work was everywhere for a bit, and now lots of companies are trying to pull people back to the office.
Yeah, it really feels like a turning point. After that big rush to remote, businesses are now like stepping back and figuring out what actually makes sense for the long run.
And that's exactly what we're digging into today. We've got some really interesting stuff to unpack, actually. Insights from the Stanford Institute for Economic Policy Research, SIPR, and also Vogue Business, plus some deep findings from the Capgemini Research Institute.
Hmm.
Our mission basically is to cut through all the noise. We want to help you understand the real details of this hybrid work thing, what it means for you, what employers might be thinking, and well, where this whole future of work might actually be going.
Exactly. It's about getting past the headlines and looking at the core issues and maybe the trends that are really shaping things.
Okay, let's get right to it then. Hybrid work feels like the word on everyone's lips. And SEP says something like, what, 70% of firms are looking at some kind of hybrid setup?
Yeah, around 70%. And we're talking big names, right? Apple, Google, Citi, HSBC. They're all in this space.
So what's the fundamental idea behind hybrid?
Well, the core concept is really trying to get the best of both worlds. You get the office benefits,
Mm-hmm.
that spontaneous chat, maybe more innovation, building the company culture,
Right.
but you also keep the good parts of working from home, the quiet time for focused work, and obviously no commute.
Yeah, the commute's a big one for lots of people. And the SEP research seems to suggest a common pattern, like 2 days at home, 3 in the office.
That's a very common suggestion, yeah. 2 days at home for, say, individual tasks or maybe smaller meetings, and then the 3 days in the office for bigger team meetings, training, social stuff too.
Okay, and that fits with what they found about meetings, right?
It does. Their research showed, interestingly, that small meetings, like 2 to 4 people, can be just as efficient over video as in person. Plus, you save the travel time.
Makes sense. Everyone gets a decent-sized box on Zoom. You can actually see them.
Exactly. But then you get to the bigger meetings, say 10 or more people.
Ah, yeah. The wall of tiny faces.
Precisely. The research highlighted that those are often seen as worse by video. People are just small squares, it's hard to see gestures, read the room.
And the whole mute-unmute dance can make things feel really stilted.
Totally. It just doesn't flow the same way. So video seems best for those smaller, more focused interactions.
Okay, so hybrid sounds pretty good in theory. Office for collaboration, home for focus.
Yeah.
But then the big question, who decides which days? How much choice do employees actually get?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's really tricky because on one side, you've got the argument for trusting your employees, giving them autonomy.
Right.
And that big IC survey, over 35,000 Americans, found that, wow, 32% never want to go back to the office, full stop.
32%, that's almost a third.
Yeah. And often these are people maybe with young kids living further out in the suburbs, facing those really painful commutes.
That flexibility is probably a lifesaver for them. But then you said there's the other side, too.
Exactly. The same survey found 21% who never want to work from home again.
Okay, so the complete opposite.
Right. And these might be, younger folks, maybe single, living in city centers, or perhaps empty nesters who actually enjoy the social side of the office
Mhm.
or just need that separation.
So you have these totally opposing desires. Letting people choose seems like the easy answer, maybe. I remember hearing about managers just saying, treat them like guilt, let them figure it out.
Some definitely started that way.
Hmm.
But the SIPAR research actually started flagging some pretty serious potential problems with that approach,
Yeah.
enough that the advice began to change.
Okay, so letting everyone choose their WFH days.
Yeah.
What were the big worries there?
Well, the first major one was around sort of management and fairness, equity. There's this real anxiety about creating two tiers, an office in-group and a remote out-group.
Ah, yeah, I can see that.
Even if you try hard, like make office people take video calls from their desks, the folks at home can still feel like they're missing out, the quick chats in the hallway, grabbing coffee together.
Those informal moments where sometimes important stuff actually happens or connections get built.
Exactly. That spontaneous flow of information and connection, it's hard to replicate remotely.
Okay, so that's the equity concern. What else?
The second big one was about using the office space efficiently. Basically, the fear of ghost towns on certain days.
Ah, because everyone would take the same days off.
Pretty much. The data suggested most people, if they had free choice, would probably opt for Monday and Friday at home.
Makes sense. Extend the weekend feel.
Right. But the numbers were stark. Only 36% said they'd choose to come in on a Friday versus 82% on a Wednesday.
Wow. So if you need enough desks for everyone on Wednesday?
You've got a ton of empty, expensive desks sitting there on Friday and Monday. It's a nightmare for planning office capacity and costs.
Okay. Inefficient space. Got it. And there was a third concern you mentioned that might be the most critical: diversity.
Yes, and this one is really sobering. The research found that college-educated women with young children showed a significantly higher preference for working from home full-time, almost 50% higher than men in similar situations.
50% higher. Wow.
And this connects to earlier research, like a study back in 2015 in China. It found that employees who worked from home had a 50% lower promotion rate after about 21 months.
A 50% lower promotion rate? That's huge. The WFH promotion penalty.
Exactly. So the worry is, if you let everyone choose, and certain groups disproportionately choose or need to work remotely more often.
They might unintentionally get left behind in terms of career progression.
Precisely. Because managers might just naturally overlook people they don't see as often. It could seriously undermine diversity efforts and honestly could even create legal risks for companies down the road.
Okay, those are some really compelling reasons against total employee choice. So what's the alternative advice then? What are companies being told now?
The shift in advice, based on these concerns, is really towards managers coordinating the schedule for their teams.
So the manager decides.
Essentially, yes. The recommendation from Tepper is often something like, okay, this whole team works from home on, say, Wednesday and Friday, and everyone is expected in the office Monday, Tuesday, Thursday.
A structured hybrid schedule.
Exactly. And a crucial part of that advice is that it has to apply all the way up, from the CEO down.
Why is that so important?
Because if the senior leaders are seen popping into the office on supposed home days, it creates this pressure. Like, you need to be seen, you need to show face, maybe curry favor.
Right. It undermines the whole system if the bosses aren't sticking to it.
Totally. It just collapses.
But, as Vogue Business reported, just telling people you must come back these days isn't exactly going down smoothly everywhere. Companies like TikTok, Amazon, Burberry, they've seen pushback, right?
Oh, absolutely. There's definite discontent. It really highlights this tension. McKinsey had an interesting point. They noted that, yeah, maybe there was an initial productivity bump with remote work, but over the longer term, something got lost. That sense of connection, the company culture, what they call the human glue, it sort of disappeared for some places.
The human glue. I like that. And the numbers seem to reflect this shift back, or at least towards more structure, that Axios HQ survey.
Yeah, their survey found almost half, 45% of companies are actually fully back in the office now.
Wow.
But still, 44% are doing some kind of hybrid. And within that hybrid group, the most common setup seems to be 3 days in the office.
3 days seems to be the magic number for many right now.
It does. And interestingly, 37% of the leaders they surveyed said they plan to increase the number required in office days.
So the trend might be leaning even more towards office time, or at least mandated office time.
It definitely suggests companies are still tweaking the formula, trying to find what works, but it's not always a friction-free process.
So navigating these hybrid policies, it sounds like there are a lot of challenges beyond just deciding the schedule. What else do companies need to really think about?
Well, Vogue Business and Capgemini bring up some key points. One big one is the impact on parents and caregivers. Mandates can be particularly tough for them.
Yeah, losing that flexibility could be a deal breaker.
Exactly. Companies risk losing really good people, high performers, who value that trust and flexibility. And BCG, the Boston Consulting Group, also made a great point. Just tracking when people tap in and out of the office, that's not really how you measure performance or inspire creativity, is it?
Not at all. Presence doesn't equal productivity.
Yeah.
And communication seems absolutely vital here.
Hugely important. Grace McCarrick, a workplace expert mentioned by Vogue Business, said many mandates just fail because the reasoning is so weak.
Like what? Just, it's better for culture.
Yeah, vague stuff like, we'll be more productive or closer as a team. It just doesn't cut it. Companies really need to explain why. What specific things are better done face-to-face? What skills can only really be developed together in person?
You need to sell the benefits of the office, not just demand attendance. And it's pretty clear one size won't fit all.
Definitely not. Vogue Business talks about 3 main things to balance.
Yeah.
What employees actually want, generational differences, and of course the needs of the business itself.
And BCG mentioned understanding the actual work, right? Like, does the role involve clients? How much collaboration is truly needed?
Exactly. Client-facing roles might need more office time. Roles focused on deep individual work, maybe less. And what about learning opportunities? Sometimes those happen best in person.
So it sounds like companies need to be constantly listening.
Absolutely. Regular pulse checks, surveys. Vogue Business really stressed that. Understand how people are feeling, what's working, what's not.
And those generational differences BCG mentioned.
Yeah, interesting insights there. They suggested folks in their 20s often really want development opportunities. Those in their 30s and 40s might prioritize stability and work-life balance more.
Okay.
And then people in their 50s and 60s often want to feel valued, share their knowledge, maybe mentor others. So the workplace needs to feel psychologically safe and cater to these different needs across the board.
Which implies you probably shouldn't just dictate a policy without talking to people first.
That seems to be a big mistake companies make. Axios HQ found that employees are way more likely, like 31% more likely, to accept a policy if they feel their feedback was actually considered.
Makes sense. Feeling heard matters.
And 28% feel better if they know the company at least explored other options. It's just respect.
So maybe a test and learn approach is better.
McKinsey recommends exactly that. A test and adapt mindset. Try something, see how it goes, review it regularly, be willing to tweak it.
And Vogue Business had a point about people potentially voting with their feet eventually.
Yeah, they suggested that as the job market maybe gets stronger, you might see people moving to companies whose work style just fits them better. If your company's policy doesn't work for you, maybe you'll look elsewhere.
Which means making those office days count is crucial if you do mandate them.
Absolutely critical. BCG emphasized this. You can't just expect people to show up. You need to make the office somewhere they want to be. Reinvigorate the culture, create great collaborative spaces, maybe offer useful amenities, made it valuable.
Don't just mandate presence, create purpose for being there.
Exactly. As Grace McCarrick said, if you want high performance, you have to create the conditions for it.
Okay, so looking even further ahead, what might the future of this hybrid world really hold? Any longer-term predictions?
Well, Vogue Business brought up an interesting angle related to longer lifespans. You might see some friction, potentially, experienced workers feeling maybe unheard, while younger workers are really craving mentorship.
Bridging that gap.
Yeah, Grace McCarrick suggested things like formal mentorship programs pairing different age groups could be really helpful there. But overall, the feeling is still strong. Hybrid, in some form, seems to be the direction of travel.
That Axios HQ idea about attention residue also seems relevant here.
Oh yeah, that's fascinating. The idea that when you switch tasks, part of your brain is still stuck on the last one.
Right, so maybe having more control over your environment, whether that's quiet focus at home or collaborative buzz in the office, helps you be more fully present and productive in whatever you're doing, less mental clutter.
That makes a lot of sense. And it links to what BCG said about focusing on outcomes and accountability, trusting people to manage their time and place to deliver results.
Grace McCarrick also predicted a shift away from rigid job roles.
Yeah, more towards using individual skills flexibly, like people acting as internal consultants, jumping onto different projects based on their expertise.
More fluid, could be exciting, but maybe less structured too.
Definitely a challenge there. It requires different ways of managing and working.
And communication skills just keep getting more important, it sounds like.
Absolutely essential. Axios HQ stressed this, not just between humans, but potentially managing AI agents alongside human teams too.
Wow, okay. That adds another layer.
So communication and management training become even more valuable. And just within the human teams in hybrid setups, managing different expectations, ensuring clarity, it requires real skill in communication and compromise.
So let's wrap this up with the Capgemini Research Institute findings. What was their big picture take?
Their global research really reinforces the idea that hybrid is sticking around. They found 75% of organizations expect at least 30% of their workforce to be remote going forward.
Okay, a significant chunk.
And over a third expect that number to be closer to 70%.
70%, so really embracing remote for a large portion.
It seems so for some. They noted the initial boosts in productivity and cost savings, but they also flagged rising concerns about burnout.
The downside.
Yeah. And interestingly, half of the new employees they surveyed said they'd actually consider quitting if the job was only remote. They wanted some connection.
So even new hires aren't always wanting fully remote. Interesting.
It really highlights the complexity. Capgemini's conclusion was basically, for hybrid to really work well long-term, companies need a fundamental shift.
Fair shift in what way?
Focusing much more on individual employee needs, changing how managers manage, rethinking how teams connect and interact, and, crucially, really rebooting the whole purpose and design of the physical office space itself.
Okay, so summing all this up, it really feels like hybrid work in some capacity is probably here to stay. But figuring out the how, that's the messy part, isn't it?
Definitely. It's complex, it's evolving. There's this constant push and pull between employee desire for flexibility and employer worries about things like fairness, culture, efficiency.
And it seems like right now, anyway, we're seeing a trend towards more structured, maybe mandated hybrid schedules as companies try to get a handle on all those challenges.
That seems to be the current direction for many, yeah. Which just makes clear communication, really listening to feedback and being willing to adapt. It makes all of that even more important.
Absolutely. So, for you listening to this, maybe a final thought to chew on. Think about your own ideal work setup. What mix of flexibility, connection, structure, what would make you most productive and, frankly, most fulfilled? As companies keep experimenting, how are you going to navigate these shifting sands in your own career?
Yeah, it's definitely a conversation that's going to keep going for a while.